So it looks like I was proven right again regarding the Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler fight being a complete fiasco from McGregor there on January the 1st when he made his announcement. We're going to have a look at Dana White shooting that announcement down and Michael Chandler's reaction to it. And we're also going to have a look at a UFC champion who has just come out and condemned the disgusting comments from Sean Strickland last weekend. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Before we do, if you could hit like, subscribe and share, I'd really appreciate it. We've got some good numbers coming in over the last couple of days and I want to keep the momentum going. So Dana White was asked whether Conor McGregor was actually being truthful when he made his big announcement over a glass of wine at Christmas, and he said that he'd be fighting at 185 in July International Fight Week. And what did Dana White have to say about that?
So where do things stand with Conor right now? Is he fighting in June?
No.
Oh yeah, look, a lot of people speculated that this was actually the case because there was no UFC announcement after McGregor did his little speech and his little maniacal laugh. And a lot of people speculated that this was in fact the case, that there was no announcement. The UFC didn't come out and say, listen, Conor McGregor's fighting in July, this is actually going to happen. And Dana goes on to say, listen, when Conor's ready to fight, you guys will know and we'll come out and we'll make a statement about it. And it's kind of like, okay, we're getting to the stage now. And I said this back in the very beginning of January when he made the announcement. Is it time to move on for Michael Chandler? Surely it is. The guy's coming close to 38 years old. How much more juice is left in the tank? Should he just move on from the Conor McGregor? I want to know how much is involved. How much of a big deal is this fight for Michael Chandler that he's hanging on so desperately? Because if you think about it, Michael Chandler possibly could have competed twice in the octagon since this whole Conor McGregor thing came about. In terms of promoting them two fights and the purses and wins bonus, because we know the guy likes to bang. I don't know what the Conor McGregor fight gives you in terms of monetary gain. Is it better than being active, having a couple of fights on your belt, actually being relevant in that division? I don't know. Here's an interview that he did recently where he talks about looking like a bit of a dummy. A big dummy is his actual words. Let's have a little listen to see what he thinks about waiting so long for this elusive Conor McGregor fight.
It never got to the point where I was like, hey, it's happening soon. We're making a phone call. And also, I also never gotten a phone call, by the way, from the UFC. Hey, probably not happening. You should probably think about stop wasting some time, right?
Yeah.
So that's never happened. And no, I got no calls from any of that stuff. So it's always been Chandler versus McGregor. It's just the question was when.
I think what we can take from that little bit there is that there's a lot of copium and a lot of mixed signals coming from the UFC. So there's no fights being offered to Michael Chandler, but in the same breath, there's not even a phone call about the possibility of Conor McGregor returning. Hunter Campbell, Dana White, the UFC in general have zero contact with Michael Chandler at the moment. So he finishes up shooting The Ultimate Fighter. That's a bit of a flop. No one's really interested in it. And then we spend the next year completely silent, no connection with the UFC, no conversations. I think it's time to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, what the hell is going on here? This is actually getting ludicrous at this stage.
We hear the noise. We see the people talking to me about wasting my career and all that kind of stuff. And they have it way overblown. Everyone thinks it's been like 2 years since I have fought. Ultimately, man, when you feel it in your heart, in your gut, you just got to roll with it, and I can live with it. The rest of my life, if this fight never was going to happen, it's going to happen. But if it never was going to, I can lay my head on the pillow and be fine. And I can hop into a training camp tomorrow, and I can fight the next guy.
I'm not going to be too hard on Michael Chandler because I actually do like the guy. But just going off what he's saying here and what he has said in the past regarding this fight maybe happening or not happening, I think that he's trying to convince himself more so than the people that are asking the questions. He's talking about making calculated risks. This is a massive risk to stay out so long and wait for the big payday off Conor McGregor. You have to ask yourself the question, if you're the UFC, you bring Michael Chandler over to the UFC from Bellator. He comes in, he has a couple of good fights. He does like to throw hands and it's really entertaining. But he's also lost to Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, and he was rocked by Tony Ferguson. And he's 38 years old. So is it a case of the UFC making calculated risks in terms of, do we put him back in there and have the same heat coming on us, because we're getting a lot of heat for Tony Ferguson competing? The fans are really turning against us. Do we want the same thing to happen with Michael Chandler? So is it a case of the UFC thinking, listen, we might as well just cut our losses here. Instead of cutting him out because he's under contract, let's give him the fight with Conor McGregor. That'll keep him quiet for a year or two, and hopefully it'll all just fizzle out in the end and we won't have to deal with the problem. And if you were to ask me now, or you were to ask me to put some money on whether this is actually going to happen, my bet would be that Conor McGregor isn't going to fight Michael Chandler. And any advice that I would give would be to move on now. Get another 1 or 2 fights under your belt. Play out the rest of your contract, because I do think that we have passed the point of desperation, and I don't like leaving that power in somebody else's hand. That's just my advice anyway. So let's pop over here to the new UFC champion, Raquel Pennington, coming hot off the back of one of the worst performances and fights that you'd ever see in your life in terms of Snorefest. We have her commenting on the Sean Strickland situation that went down last weekend in terms of him ranting at a left-wing nutjob of a reporter, and her being part of the LGBTQ community isn't too happy with Sean Strickland.
To pass so much judgment, at the end of the day, like, the things he says doesn't impact my life, and like, it's never gonna impact my life. Like, I mean, I heard bits and pieces here and just the things he was saying, but you know what, that's on him, it's not on me, and like I said, it's not gonna impact my life. But the fact that he could pass so much judgment or just make disgusting comments, like, kind of shows what kind of person he is. So I mean, they're about freedom of speech, and that's fine. Everybody's allowed that. You're allowed your own opinion, and you're allowed to feel the way that you want to feel. I just feel that's the reason why the world is the way it is. So many people have to make so many other comments about other people's lives or the way that they live, or, you know, gender and race, and it stems from there. And it's like, I can learn so much from you, you can learn so much from me if you're just willing to sit there and listen and learn as people. Like, so
here we have the headline highlighted. I'm not even allowed to say these words. It's interesting. It's an interesting little pushback on Sean Strickland. I actually watched a Luke Thomas breakdown on the Sean Strickland situation, and I was going to cover it, but you know what? It was so infuriating to listen to. I couldn't put you through it, and I couldn't put myself through it a second time, because it was literally subverting the narrative. I speak about it all the time, and I mention that man all the time, and all you got to do is pop over there. He totally turned it into something that it really wasn't, and he came out and he called the UFC a right-wing organization. He called the fans right-wing. He alluded to the fact that a lot of people are very badly educated on how the world works, and listen, it's fair for the left to push back on what Sean Strickland said, and it was probably 50-50 online, and I think that that's completely and utterly untrue. We all know that Sean Strickland said what everyone thinks and what everyone is terrified to say. That's all that happened there in the weekend. You can call it freedom of speech, you can call it an outlandish rant or attack, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but the fact of the matter is that the majority of people agree with what Sean Strickland said. It's just as simple as that. So Luke Thomas used the straw man ad hominem attack, and he went after Sean Strickland. He categorically said that people that espouse this opinion are only people that have suffered some horrific trauma in their past, and that is what is driving the opinions that Sean Strickland espoused last weekend. It's not about trauma during childhood. It's not about attacking other people for their beliefs. It's the fact that we have spent such a long time not being allowed to speak, not being allowed to have an opinion that the majority of people have. That's what's really frustrating when it comes to this left-right narrative. It's the fact that people that are slightly conservative or that lean slightly right, which we know the Overton window has moved so much, the people that are slightly right, we were all liberals back in the day. You know, we were all about freedom of speech. We were all about freedom to do whatever you wanted to do. Unfortunately, the world has shifted. And as Raquel Pennington said there, the world has shifted. And now we're headed towards a place where, just like on Twitter or X, Elon Musk gives people the chance to speak their mind and speak freely. When you've spent such a long time having the constraints pulled in really tight by your government or your social media platforms, you're so used of being in an echo chamber where everybody claps their hands for your life decisions that we shouldn't even be talking about in public anyway. So hopefully we're headed into a time where that's not going to be the case anymore, where we can actually have an opinion on stuff that is being taught to our kids across these social media platforms. Luke Thomas hates the idea of that. Raquel Pennington came out hard against Sean Strickland and called these comments disgusting. Let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe pop over, have a little look at the reaction from Luke Thomas, have a little look at the Raquel Pennington interview, and tell me what you think in terms of this being too far by Sean Strickland or just the beginning for free speech.